Hello everybody, Kyle Wetzel here with Wolverine Engines. I'm going to do another Darton Sleeve installation video, this time in our new HAAS machine, so you guys can see that, and go over a little bit better in detail of what we do, why we do it, and the different options with the Darton Sleeves. So this is the sleeve we're going to do. It is a, it's called a MID sleeve, M-I-D sleeve, and it stands for Modular Integrated Deck. And what we're going to do is we are going to cut everything out of here. We're going to cut the deck out. We're going to expose this block so it's one big rectangular channel with 4 bottom bores that this is going to press into. It's going to make back up the deck surface. This is the cooling system. And there's 3 O-rings that go along the bottom. This gets pressed into place, and the O-rings will seal it along with a flange sealant. So let's talk a little bit about why we do this system and what other options there are. The first video that we did, we get a lot of comments about people saying, man, that looks like that's not strong at all. It takes all the strength out of the block. You cut everything away. And they're absolutely correct, it does. All the strength is in the sleeve. This sleeve is harder than hinges of hell. It really is. This thing is, the cast iron that they use in this is, it's ridiculous. It's very hard for us to machine. When we put these all in, we deck it and rebore it, and it's very difficult to cut this. It's super strong. It's super thick. You're basically replacing that. The factory block has the cast iron sleeve and aluminum on the outside, and we're replacing that with this super strong cast iron that goes in there the whole way. So there's no aluminum backing. It's replaced entirely with this material, and it can withstand a lot of abuse. There's some cars out there with this setup running over 3,000 horsepower on factory blocks, and the big advantage to this is we can take this is an aluminum block. This is a 5.3 liter, and we are going to take it out to a 7 liter today. So we get the benefits of an aluminum block at about half the cost of buying an aftermarket aluminum block, and it's very strong. However, like a lot of people commented, you're taking a lot of material out of this block, and it loses rigidity. It loses structure. When we do this. This is pretty much for race applications. This is for serious builds. When we do this, it requires a front and rear motor plate. So you don't use motor mounts in this. It is a solid motor plate that bolts to the back, it bolts to the front, and it extends out to the frame of the vehicle. And the frame of the vehicle actually supports this block and keeps it from twisting. Now, most of what we sell is a dry sleeve installation. We can do the same thing as far as taking a 5.3 liter block out to a 7 liter, a 427 cubic inch, or even a 434 cubic inch, going 30 over on that bore. And we can even go bigger, but we don't like to go to the maximum bore size because then it can never be rebuilt again. You got to put all new sleeves in it. So we like to leave as much meat as possible, but we'll do it to customer specifications, whatever they want. But the dry sleeve, it leaves the factory aluminum in place. It leaves the factory deck in place. It just goes to the bigger bore. It's still the super strong cast iron sleeve material, but it is much thinner. It is like this bottom thickness the whole way down through, all the way up. And there's a little flange at the top, and it still has these flats on it, but the flange is much smaller. It doesn't have the coolant holes, and it doesn't have the deck surface built into it. That's what we do 90% of. That's what we recommend for most applications, unless you're, getting up over 2,000 horsepower doing something serious. This one's going overseas in a race application. went over to Sweden, I think. So I'm gonna walk you through the whole process from start to finish. Try to go a little bit more into depth about everything of what we do. And if you guys have any questions or comments, just leave them down below and I'll get back to you. Thanks. All right, our first step is we're gonna need to get this thing set up to go in the machine. So when we do this, we go off of the blueprint of the block. And we're very, very precise about it. We're doing it in CNC machining. Just to give you guys an idea, for those of you who don't know about blueprinting, just real quick, basically what we're doing is we're gonna go off of crank center line. I'm gonna show you how we're gonna do that. All our machining is gonna go off of crank center line, just like how the crankshaft would sit in here. We then line the block up off of crank cam correlation. So we line up the cam with the crank, and that's our straight up and down, that's our 0. And then we go to -45 and +45 on our deck surfaces. What this does is this puts the block perfectly straight at 90 degrees. This also puts it perfectly level with crank center line. So all the pistons are gonna come up nice and even to the deck. They're not gonna be working downhill or slanted with the head slanted on the block or anything weird like that. And then we go off of this rear dowel pin hole that the factory uses. So when they get the casting, they machine out the bottom, they machine this dowel pin hole, they flip it over, and they machine both of these. And everything goes off of the dowel pin hole for their machining. So we're gonna bring our probe in here, touch probe, we're gonna probe this off, and we're gonna go back off of that hole for all our machining to put everything perfect in line. Now guys, Darton claims, Darton requires a 1/2 thousandths tolerance when machining this. And that's really, really tight tolerances in the machining world. Our machine spec is 2/10 of a thousandth, so we're plenty good on tolerance on our machine. And it's a brand new machine too, so it's good and tight. But even our old machine that we used, it put them in really, really good. But for those of you who don't know, 1/2 thousandths tolerance, the average human hair thickness is 2 thousandths, so it's 4 times smaller than a human hair. And even on regular machining, even if we're not putting sleeves in, you know, just say we're boring or decking a block or whatever, we can still blueprint the block and still get a lot of those benefits of squaring everything up, lining the cylinders up within the heads so that they're even in the chambers. There's a lot of little tweaks we do using CNC equipment to get a little extra power here and there out of our builds. All right, so we're gonna use front and rear main cap. That's all we need. We're gonna use 2 rings. I don't know if you can see the rings down there. I'm not sure that's in the, but we do a lot of different motors. We have a lot of different rings for them. But basically, the ring looks like this, and it lines up perfectly in, it'll actually stick a little bit, in a crankshaft bore. And we're gonna use a precision ground tool steel bar. It's a heavy sucker. It runs right through here. It's gonna run right through. We're gonna put these rings on under the front and rear cap. And then we have a plate that goes on the back that's just gonna line us up. It's got dowel pin holes that line up in the machine, and it's gonna hold it to the machine. And then on the front, this rides on a roller bearing on a tailstock. So when we're gonna come down, we're gonna actually probe this bar. This bar has already been trammed into the machine on the tailstock, so we know it's perfectly straight in both the X-axis and the Z-axis, running alongside the mill and then up and down in the mill. All right, we're just bolting this plate to the back. Guys, LS block, 10 millimeter by 1.5 bolts. 10 millimeter by 1.5. 3/8/16 will thread in. It's about 20 thousandths small. It'll wobble around on the hole, and you can do damage to the threads. I can't tell you how many engines customers bring in on their engine stands that have 3/8 bolts in the back. So that's why I'm saying that for those of you who don't know. All right, she's ready to go in the machine. I got to get the tombstone in there out, and We'll check back in when we get it in there. Forgot the studs. Need a way to bolt it down. All right, studs in. That should work better. All right, here's a close-up of this bar that we're going to use to probe the side of. It's exactly 2 inches. It's precision ground as well. So we probe one side of this, and then we come straight up the cam crank center line distance, and then we'll roll the block into the probe. As soon as it touches, we're perfectly straight up and down. And it's all automated program that does it. But that's how it works. Alright, so we've got our X probed on that hole in the back of the block. We've got our Y probed off of the bar, and our Z probed right to the tailstock, which is exactly crankshaft center line halfway up this bar. Alright, one final check before we start machining. We probed cam crank center line here. You can see a little better. Cam crank center line here. To level up our A-axis and to get the decks squared up so everything's nice and true and blueprinted. And one thing I do is I put a dial indicator on here and I check it after I do it on every block. Newer blocks like the LS's, they're generally within a few thousandths. But sometimes on the old stuff, we're doing like old Chryslers, for instance, we're trying to blueprint those. It's not uncommon for them to be off 20 thousandths or so. And sometimes there's not enough material to do it, depending on what deck height you're going for and everything. So I just make a sweep across, make sure, you know, I'm within a few thousandths or so. And we're going to deck everything anyways, but, yep. So, down one, down, this block's actually really good. Down, it's within a thou, half a thou, something like that. So yeah, this block's really, really good. It was actually pretty close to blueprint from the factory in regards to that angle. Normally don't see them that close, but good. Less material we got to remove. All right, next up we're going to check our deck height. So it's going to come down, it's going to probe it, and it's going to give us a dimension from crank center line up to the deck surface so we can see what the factory left us with the deck height. Normally we're 9240, 245, something like that. Obviously we're going to have to cut a little off. We try to leave as much meat on the LS's as we can. From the factory, the piston's already protruded a little bit out of the deck, so we don't want to take off any more than we have to. Alright, we are exactly 9.240 down to the 10th. Pretty odd to get an even number like that. Alright, next up we're going to set our roughing boring head. This is what's going to remove all the meat from the block. This thing's pretty wicked. It's got twin cutters in it, And we're gonna set this up in our tool presetter here. So we are using this joystick, and this is a master gauge right here that we know the dimensions of. So we're gonna get it lined up on the screen here. And oh, I went over the top of it. There's the top of it. Okay. To get it close, and then I use the fine adjustment knobs to get it set. And we're gonna check our adjustment here. We're about 6/10 off in the diameter. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna leave it because this thing was cutting pretty close before, and we are rough boring right now anyways. So I'm gonna swap out our tools. Just find the top. And we are setting this to 4.215. So I'm gonna set our machine to 4.215. And then I need my Allen here. I'm watching the screen. So now I'm backing it off until I am inside the line. And I'm gonna snug this back up tight so I can still move it. And I'm gonna swing, and what I'm looking for is that high point. And it is where it's in most focus too on the machine. So now it's snugged up. I'm gonna feed it out to the line. I'm gonna tighten it up. And we'll swing back and check it. Okay, I need to readjust a little bit. All right, and basically what I'm gonna do is just keep doing this till it gets on the line. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. All right, I've got them both adjusted, so now I'm just gonna swing, make sure it comes right to that line on both sides. And I'm not worried about the height on this machine. I'm actually going to set it on the CNC mill. I feel it's a little more accurate to use the touch probe on the mill. We're perfect. We're ready to go in diameter. Let's go probe our height, and away we go. Alright, first step is we're going to take this cutter, and it's set up about 70 thousandths smaller than the bottom. Hold on. Okay, we're set up 70 thousandths smaller than this diameter. So it's just going to rough it. It's going to run from the top of the deck all the way through the bottom. We're just going to hog out a bunch of material right now, and from there we're going to come back and we're going to cut this thicker top part, the water jacket. That's what's really going to open the block up when we cut this on the next step. So right now, bottom smaller than the bottom cylinder, just roughing it out all the way through. All right, just checking now. After we just come down and touch, I want to make sure everything is centered. And guys, you can really see, let me show you how much metal this is taking out. We're going to use coolant on this because we don't want any heat to distort any of our measurements. So like I said, it's very precise. So we're going to use coolant to keep everything consistent temperature. All right, let me show you just how much material is being taken out. It's a lot. Alright guys, here's what we're left with. It's been all cut out with the exception of a little bit of that top flange. The factory sleeves are flanged, so you can see there's a little bit. We're gonna cut all that. We're gonna cut all this out. But we have our basic dimension here. You can see at the bottom of the web here, all the way down, you can see that we actually did touch, just barely touched the bottom web, which is perfect. So we got plenty of room. We're all the way through. The sleeve's not gonna hang up on anything. This is just a rough bore. It's actually got a really good finish, but it's just a rough bore. So we're not concerned with any of that. And if you did hear a clunk at the bottom, what's basically happening is we're cutting through aluminum and this entire cast iron sleeve. And if you've never seen the way these sleeves are done, the block is cast around them, so they have ribs all the way up them. And as we're going through, we get to the bottom, and the machine's pushing. It's pushing hard as it's taking that big cut on the block. Well, what happens is the very bottom of the sleeve will, when it gets all the way down there, it gets real thin. It'll break out, and that's that noise you hear. You hear that clunk, and then you hear the skipping, which is it's just cutting on the one side of the web offset here on the mains. So now we're gonna just double check. I don't have a dial bore gauge set up. I don't need one yet. That will come, but just to show you, we still have plenty of room to go. Like I said, that was just roughed out. So next step, we cut this top bore, and we're gonna cut a lot bigger than this because this is our coolant passage. So we're gonna come down right into here, and we're gonna plunge all the way down to this bottom, well, not quite to the bottom step, but almost to that bottom step. We're gonna come in, again with a finishing tool, and do that bottom step. Because this is actually, this step right here is what controls the height of the sleeve. So that's pretty important. All right. All right, guys, back over at the tool presetter. We have our twin disc boring head back over here. Now we're gonna set it up for that larger coolant jacket diameter, which is 4.830. I had it there, there we go, 4.830. And one thing, oh, hold on, I got ahead of myself. One thing we want to do here, we're not going to reset the height on the machine because it shouldn't change, but we want to double check it. So we're going to set this exactly to the top, and that way when we move it out to our 4.830, we know that's the higher one. That's the one that's going to matter. 830, get back over here. Sound effects help. All right, then we know that we are exactly at the same height, and we don't have to reset it. Obviously, if something goes awry, then we can reset it or fix the problem or whatever we need to do. So let's just get us out here in the ballpark. Way out there you are. The big cut. Okay. Wipe that debris off. Just a little bit of metal shavings. All right, tighten it down. Now, like I said, this is maxing out my cutter, and I'm actually just a little shy, but the point is I'm even here. And this dimension is not crucial. This doesn't hold anything. It doesn't support anything. All this is doing is clearing out a spot for the coolant to surround the cylinder. So I think it's plus or minus 5 thousandths is the spec that Darton gives on these, on this dimension. Jeez, can't talk. All right, let's get it back over there and get it in the machine. looking good here. We're just gonna double check this dimension. Now this should have left me, I think it's 20 thousandths or 15 thousandths or something. So we got 3.580 and we're measuring here 3.6. So we're 20 thousandths still to go. And we leave this sticking out of the block a little bit because we're gonna come back to take a skim cut on these. So I think it's 15 thousandths, I think is what the program figures on, that we're gonna come in and cut with an end mill that'll give us a really smooth, nice, flat finish for this to sit to. Very important. These inserts they've been roughing, so first off, they're not gonna give us a nice smooth surface. And second off, they have a nice big radius, and then if you saw in the machine, they're actually angled a little bit. So it's not gonna be flat, it's not gonna be smooth, and it's gonna have a radius in the edge, and we don't want any of that. This is probably the most important part of doing this. Alright, here's what we're left with. Now you'll notice number 1 is higher than the rest of them. It's the only one that's different. And reason is because you will go in the timing cover right here. So number 1 sleeve, this is actually number 1 sleeve, I've been using this demonstration, has a notch in it, and we're going to cut that flat with an end mill in here. But everything else gets cut down completely round and the sleeves go in to match that. So now we get set up on our end mill, and we're gonna cut the top out, and we're gonna cut the bottom flat, and we're gonna cut this flat angle piece right in here so we don't go into the timing cover on number 1. But here's kind of some of the aftermath piling up chunks. Alright, next up we're going to machine this top counterbore for the big top flange of the sleeve.